Hey guys, it's Zach back with another review, this time of the Eweadn X23 Pro. It's sort of an HTS Scyrox V6 shape, but it's more in the budget segment. My last experience with this company was very positive, reviewing both the S9 Ultra and testing out the S9 Pro Max. How did I do when they cranked down the price, and is this mouse worth picking up for you? Let's find out. So here we have it, the Eweadn X23, and yes, I said Eweadn, and yes, I have 3 of them. Shout out to Eweadn for sending out 3 of these for me to check out. There's the orange black gradient colorway, white pink, and it also comes in an orange colorway. Also stick around to the end of the video as I'll be announcing a giveaway of 2 of these mice in association with Eweadn, great company that I've been working with. As far as this mouse goes though, it's not quite in the same range as the S9 Ultra that I reviewed from them before. This is more after the shape of the HTS Plus, the Scyrox V6, or the Phylina S450 or 480. It's a little bit on the heavier side, but in my estimation, it's pretty well implemented for the price, which comes in at sub $40, even around $30 sometimes on Amazon. So as you can see here, there are 3 versions of the mouse from SC through Pro, and the colorways that I mentioned, including the orange. The lava orange kind of pops, looks sort of like a Lamzu orange, also with the pink, black, and white here. But there's a very small price difference of only $7 between these 3, so let's break that down. On the SC, I'm gonna be honest, I really don't know what an instant S205 or a freak chip is. That's quite the combination there, so I've not tested that, but all of these do come in at 1000 hertz. The 23 and the Pro both have a 3311. I have used this BK3633 before, and I can say the performance on that with the Pro and the 3311 at 1K hertz was very solid. The 23 Pro comes with Huano 100 million green shell white dots, which is a switch I'm familiar with. They're typically on the more tactile side. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And this does come with a huge battery. Even though you see this coming in around 60 grams, if you drop this battery to maybe 250 milliamp hours, you get a much more reasonable weight for the price here. And I think that would really increase the value of the mouse. However, it does raise the question of, are people who are buying these budget mice really those who are tweaking the mice the most with a battery mod? Regardless, as far as the click implementation goes with those green shell white dots, it's fairly tactile with some very nice rebound. The buttons themselves here have a little bit of side play, not the tightest that I've seen on the mouse. And there's a fair amount of pre-travel, not much post-travel. In-game, they were very usable. Don't say spammable, don't say spammable. And they were just entirely spammable. God, I can't help saying that. Anyway, no issue using these. Pretty satisfying. They may be a little bit spongy. Not necessarily the tightest clicks that I've ever used, but they weren't something that I noticed negatively in game. And just sitting here spamming them was sort of a nice experience. So overall, pretty solid click implementation for the price of the mouse. The scroll wheel here does have defined steps. They're very light. The click is about a medium actuation. The rebounds very nicely, so no issues here on the scroll wheel. The side buttons here are positioned pretty far forward. They do protrude here nicely. They're actually very usable. They're very light in actuation, and you can spam them very nicely. But I will say construction-wise, they sink super far into the shell if you try and push them in there. Which, ironically, due to that, there's hard to get any wobble on the buttons because they sink in so quickly. But yeah, they do sink in the shell, but in use, they were pretty satisfactory. So probably like a 7 out of 10, and very passable for a mouse in this price range. The coating is there. It's not going to be a god tier coating, but honestly, it's not bad at all. I found the coating across all 3 of these mice to be pretty much the same. If your hand warms up, you get some humidity in the room. It sticks pretty well. Like right now, I have no grip tape on, and this is sticking in my grip very nicely. Not really slipping at all. I've seen plenty of mice at this price or higher not have a coating at all. So I would say the inclusion of a coating is a win for this, especially the fact that it doesn't really suffer on this gradient colorway here. So overall, pretty passable, lightly rubberized, pretty smooth to the touch. That's it for the coating. Build integrity, I will say there is some flex, and you can probably hear this. I am actuating the side buttons, both of them by pressing on the side. There's a fair amount of flex there, probably the most flex I've seen in the mouse weighing in this heavy in a while, so that's something to take note of. No flex here on the top back, no flex here on the front, really not much flex to write about here on the bottom, maybe a little bit if you press in where this dongle storage is, which does bring me to the bottom of the mouse. As you can see here, we have a pretty suboptimal skate design. They're very thin, both in the actual size of the skate as well as the thickness of the skate. They're black PTFE, and they perform as you would expect a black PTFE skate to perform. Very slow, kind of muddy, and they did sort of muddy up my micro adjustments. I did cut in a little bit to the smoothness of my tracking, I would say, although I was still able to score pretty well in a lot of the snares that I made in Kovacs. It wasn't the smoothest experience, and I can tell I was fighting the skates a little bit, which is not really a surprise here. It's sort of similar to like an M-Chose stock skate, but just a little less thick here. So on a budget mouse, you take the skates as you will. I will also comment on the fact that these skate tracks here are a little bit thin for some dots, which is also a negative. As you notice, it's shaved down the mouse here, a la the old Phylina S480, get a larger skate to sit on there, and this dongle storage here does also interfere with that. I would suggest companies never use dongle storage this large because it really restricts the skate design you're able to get here, and honestly just shrinking this sticker here and putting a larger pad skate in the front that had just a little bit less of a control element to it would have really elevated this mouse for me. Now that I have 11 billion mice on my mouse pad here, which shout out to Pulsar, this is actually an older Nacho Customs X23 Super Glide pad, which I think is really cool. I just picked this up, happy to have it. I have 18 billion mice here, and I'm going to just kind of do a rundown of all the shapes together, as I want to give a long dedicated section to this in each individual mouse. Overall, I would say this X23 Pro is most similar to the S450 here. The S450 was a little bit larger than the old Jewel's HTS Plus, which was the originator of this sort of shape family. This is the S480 from Phylina, which is the successor to the 450, which as you might be able to tell here, it's just a little bit smaller overall in its dimensions. It's a little bit closer to the V6, but there are slight variations through all these mice. It's like the V6 is a bit taller than the S480, for example, whereas the S450 was pretty much the same height as that. You're gonna have similar shape experience overall. I don't really want to dive deep into the specifics on any mouse beside the V6 because that's the most popular of these mice here, and maybe a bit on the 480 because it's the closest in price, still coming in at 20 to 30 bucks higher, roughly depending on which version of this mouse you get. 480 is quite a bit lighter, but the clicks sadly feel a lot worse in this than the X23, even when you're paying the higher price tag. The build integrity is a lot less, there's more flex. It just feels really cheap and hollow. Like they use a really thin plastic on the shell to get the weight down, which cool, we all love light weights, but don't sacrifice your build integrity on the way to doing that. The skate design on this is more akin to what I would have liked to see on the X23 though, and again, it's much lighter, has a much better sensor and up to 8,000 hertz. So if those are features you're looking for, you would consider the S480, but as you may remember from my S480 review, I didn't really recommend this over the Scyrox V6, Scyrox, whatever it is, because they were close enough in price, and the V6 is just almost a flawless mouse to me. Going head to head to these, I mean, the V6 just wins overall in every aspect, but you expect that for a mouse that costs twice as much. The Eweadn implementation is very good, very satisfying. I like the scrollable texturing, as well as the scroll feel itself, and the skates. These are Magic Ice, but the skate design here, not amazing, but much better. The side button design I actually like a little bit more because they're larger here on the X23 Pro. I like the feel of them more too, but these are more in place, less sinking to the shell. On the V6, I will say the V6 seems to maintain a little bit more height from the top of the hump here down to the front. As you can see, a slight more taper here. On the X23, it's nothing crazy, and let me see, in hand, it does almost feel like this side taper here is a little stronger on the V6, like it's a little more pronounced. So if that's something you really like to feel in hand, the overall shape of the V6 sort of emphasizes that just a little bit more. The shape of the X23 somehow, the very minor changes they have in it feel a little bit safer, and I feel the exact same thing in the S450, so I'm going to stand by my thought that the S450 and the X23 Pro are very similar, and that the slight changes that you get in the V6 just sort of bring out that more like HTS true feel. But again, overall, if you give me a blind test, maybe half time I can tell you which mouse was which. Maybe honestly I'm the goat at feeling shapes and I wouldn't know that, and I'd nail it every time. But I think if you picked one of these up and you were going for the essence of the shape, any of them would work. It's all about what you want to spend and what compromises you're willing to make across any of these mice. My overall recommendation is if you want to buy one mouse, set it and forget it, and you have a higher budget, that's the Scyrox V6. If you want to go at the bottom of the price range, still got a nice shape, solid performance, which I'll talk about here in a bit, decent coating, and do note these are mechanical switches, then you could go with the X23 Pro. If you're into modding, you can usually shave the weight down by changing the battery, maybe cutting some holes in the bottom, removing this whole mechanism with a dongle storage, and that could be a cool play. And I guess you could really argue for the S480 if you can find this on a good sale, if you can find it used for about the same price as the X23 Pro, because you do get higher specs, you get a lighter weight, and this is overall not a bad mouse, it just doesn't quite stack up to the V6. So as far as my overall experience with this mouse, it was actually surprisingly positive. I found myself enjoying using it in both aim trainers as well as in Fortnite. I will say the one thing you need to really consider with this mouse is that it does come in the upper 50 gram range, so if that's something that's not tenable to you, you'll obviously want to look elsewhere. There was quite a bit of a hike in price. The S480 from Phylina does cost $57 on MetKeys before shipping. If you want to get the $33.95 version, you could also do some deal hunting on AliExpress and possibly come out in a better spot than that. And then the Scyrox V6 also $70+. So this is actually $32 now on Amazon with a coupon code. So if you use an Amazon Prime, for example, to get 5% back, or if a Prime Day sale pops up, you can potentially get this for sub $30, which is a pretty solid value, especially if you're willing to tinker a bit, or if it has slightly heavier weight is either your preference or something you don't mind. There may also be some who don't want to go with 3311 and want to do a 3395, which is totally valid. You can go with another mouse. My test of this in mouse test, sort of very consistent and stable pulling rate at 1000 hertz, which was pretty nice to see on this 3311. It's one of the better 3311, if not the best 3311 implementation that I've seen thus far. I've not tested a ton of them, but I have seen some bad ones a la Ajaz. And I will say in this price range, you are competing with more like an Ajaz, Attack Shark, sort of a mouse, and the fact that this has a coating, a solid sensor implementation, and very high quality clicks. Like, it doesn't feel as cheap as an Attack Shark mouse is a huge plus to it. The main attraction outside of the weight being that these skates are very slow, very thin, and not super friendly to dots going in them. Let me just pull some random dots here and actually check. These are Ultra Glide speeds, I guess. Let's see how they feel. See if they fit in there. If you can see this here, it doesn't quite fit in the skate track, unfortunately. It's leaning over the edge here at the widest part, which is sort of where the skate curves right here. So you can't quite fit the dot skates in there, which is kind of a disappointment because a lot of us do have some dot skates laying around, or you can get them super cheap in Alley. So that'd be a nice quick fix for one of the main detractors of this mouse. This sort of gives you an even better idea of how that sort of overlaps the edge there. Again, disappointing. I'll have to put the replacement skate on this to keep using it. Not a big deal, as I do have one extra pair of skates that come with a mouse, and they're a nice inclusion for a budget mouse. Okay, that's scratchy. We're gonna go with the pink one now. Anyway, overall, I will say this is a pretty solid offering for how much of a budget mouse it is. I'd say if you want to try to shape out for absolute bare minimum, it's not a bad idea to pick up this mouse. Because I have so many mice available to me, it's not something I'll be using going forward, just because I have the Scyrox V6 and it is a more expensive, lighter version of this mouse, but I do think this mouse is adequately priced. Those are my thoughts on the X23 Pro. One interesting thing to know is that the white colorway also does have white skates, but I found the performance to be the same. So let's weigh all three of these to look for weight consistencies. I would expect the one that I showed you in the video, missing the skate, to be slightly lighter. And that one comes in at 60 grams on the dot. No, I've taken the dongle out, but dongle storage cover is still on. We'll remove that in a second. The white one comes in at 61.1 grams, and then the pink one coming in at 59.1. Interesting, that's a whole gram lighter than both the other ones, but within a 1 gram tolerance, not terrible here. So we'll take the lightest one one here, pop off this bottom door, and see that that was actually over a gram. So they get you down to 58 grams if you want to play with this open bottom. I'm assuming this foam here is pretty light, and it's also glued in there, so I'm not going to mess with that. But a pretty easy 58 gram weight here, 18 grams higher than the Phylina S480, and 50 grams higher than the Scyrox V6. The max hump height here on the X23 Pro, I got 40.5 millimeters, and that matched across the S450 and the V6. And then just to note, we do have a lower max hump height of 39.8 roughly millimeters on the S480, which is the shortest of the bunch. And honestly, across these three mice, it was hard to find too much of a discernible difference in concrete measurements anywhere else, with the S480 coming in a little bit smaller. I also confirmed that the QC and clicks across all three of these units was consistent, and we'll do a sound test on this black-orange one. Giveaway. There's a giveaway. I'm partnering with Eweadn to give away 2 of these X23 Pros. I'm assuming they'll let you pick whatever color you want. There will be a link in the description below to a tweet, and that tweet will be very self-descriptive on how you should enter. You'll need to follow both myself and Eweadn on X, like, retweet, and tag your friends. So that about wraps up for my thoughts on the X23 Pro. It's a solid offering at this price. It's not the absolute best version of this shape, as the V6 outstrips it, but also outcosts it by 2x. Personally, I had a good time testing it, and for $30, I do think this is quite a good value if you want to try out the shape, or if you want to try your hand at battery modding, shell modding, or something like that. For me, Eweadn has been a great company to work with as far as their communication and their implementation of their mice. I'm looking forward to see what they have to come next. Side note, these reviews have been sent out to me by Eweadn. They did not affect my opinion on the mice whatsoever. All my thoughts and opinions were my own. And with that, please subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on Twitter at DasherJack. Check out my Discord where we discuss all things peripherals. Check out the Mousecast podcast. And with that, we'll see you.